Hello. How
Hi,
are you?
fantastic, Denise. Nice to meet you live.
Absolutely the same. So, hello and welcome to Redefining the Significance of You Time for You, by you, because of you. My name is Denise Drinkwalter, and I am an empowerment life coach supporting women around the world to lean in and realize the importance of you. The goal of this channel is to provide you, the viewer, some takeaways that will help you shift, change, reevaluate, and or become more aware of what is possible. We have a variety of fantastic guests, and today is no exception, who are sharing their life experiences that have helped them become the incredible human beings that they are today. Every one of us, sometime in our lives, have had that infamous free time and have felt guilty, embarrassed, and or wrong for taking out time for ourselves. We are here to change that and to support you to see what is possible when you take the time for you, by you, because of you. It is an absolute honor and privilege to introduce our guest today, Professor Pete Alexander. Professor Pete has had the privilege of working in a variety of positions, including sales, marketing, college professor, and small business owner over the past 35 plus year in his career. Each of these roles has had one thing in common: high stress, to the point that he was diagnosed with stress related diabetes and ended up in the hospital with a severe case of diabetic keto, ketoacidosis a few hours away from being comatose. That was a real reality check, a huge wake up call for Professor Pete. He knew he had to walk away and put his health first, ahead of his great job, secure income, good benefits. Because when you don't have your health, not much else matters. He learned that others actually admired him for his decision to put his health first, as they were starting to contemplate the same thing. And now he helps others, hard driving leaders, avoid their mistakes and benefit immensely from the wonderful tools and techniques that he has learned through this firsthand experience. Professor Pete has impacted over 100,000 lives with his best-selling book and the frequent podcast appearances that he has. I am in awe of being in your presence. I have to say, oh my goodness, I couldn't begin to imagine what happened. How could that happen so profoundly without you realizing, or maybe you did realize, but not the extent? Let's talk more about what happened there in terms of the high stress.
Sure. So it's interesting because as I had a chance to, look back at what everything happened, it's interesting because the stress, I've had a lifelong relationship with stress. I grew up in a very dysfunctional family. And what I learned from that was to bottle it up and
Mm,
not deal with it because there was so much going on with the family dysfunction that if I try to deal with it, as a kid you just get overwhelmed. So the best thing, if you read research and books on it, there's various ways that you try and deal with it as a kid, and mine was the high achiever, where I thought, okay, if I can be successful, I can get the heck out of that horrible environment, which actually did work for me. Uh, but the problem was is that that stress was bottled up and sitting inside of me.
mm,
And what happened as I started, when I went to college, as well as when I started my career, every time something stressful came up, I just kept on pushing myself, pushing myself, pushing myself. And what's interesting is that our bodies, will give us warning signals as we go along. And because our bodies are very smart.
mm.
and our bodies are the same bodies that we had back in the Stone Age.
Mm.
So, the fight or flight we hear about, it's the same thing we have today. And the problem, though, is that back in the Stone Age, people didn't have as much mental stress as we do today.
Ah,
And so what I was dealing with was all this mental pressure. And where I got the first major sign where I paid attention to what stress was going on actually happened in 2008. It was a perfect storm of stressful activities going on both personally and professionally for me,
mhm.
where I ended up being diagnosed with the stress-induced diabetes. And the problem was is because I was go, 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 I didn't listen to my body about what stress was doing to it. So instead, what I did was I burned the candle at both ends for another 10 years until I ended up in the emergency room and an extended stay in ICU with the diabetic ketoacidosis. And the crazy thing is, and this is the part that, talking about so push, push, push.
Yeah.
So I was in the emergent or in the ICU the second day in ICU, only time, and hopefully the only time I ever have to be in ICU. Uh, and on my second day, I get a text at the time from my boss. I spent most of my career in the medical device industry, and which is quite a stressful industry to be in. And my boss, who was a micromanager, says to me, and mind you, this boss knew I was in the emergency room and knew I was in ICU, sends me a text that's roughly 6 a.m. saying, you
Ah,
have a webinar you need to run at 8 o'clock. What are you going to do about it? And, you know, when you think about it right there, you think, well, you just basically give them the finger and say, you deal with it. No. What did I do? Because it was go, 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 and I had to be the high performer. And, so I grabbed my phone because what a surprise. I didn't have my work laptop with me in ICU. And I sit there and I try and push the envelope as far as possible with this phone to try and reschedule the webinar. Well, when I was admitted to the ICU, my blood sugars were so high that the medical grade glucometers could not read them. They
oh,
had to in the hospital lab. They had to manually calculate, and they estimated that my blood glucose was so high, it was 8 to 10 times higher than it should be, and that's why I was almost comatose when I was admitted. And in fact, when we got to the ER, they thought I was having a heart attack. I was green,
mm,
basically. And so what happened when I was sitting there, my blood sugars had come down over the couple days that I was in the hospital. They were still roughly high than a normal reading, but they at least came down into more what they call reasonable numbers. And as I'm sitting there rescheduling this webinar on my phone, the hospital staff was checking my blood every hour, maybe every half an hour. You definitely don't get any sleep in the ICU,
mm.
so there's nothing relaxing about that. So the nurse on call, she comes and she takes my blood sugar, and clearly, so it had been coming down. Now all of a sudden, it did a 90-degree angle and it shot straight back up. And she says to me, just a matter of factly, she says, you realize that's what put you in this hospital bed in the first place. And I knew consciously that this was a bad thing that I was doing to myself for so many years. And, I had some friends and family that told me the same thing. And it's like, yeah, 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 yeah. But when a complete stranger who had nothing to gain by telling me this, somehow that was like an epiphany moment for me. And I realized, I was trading my health for my career, which is a very bad trade. And I realized that if I didn't do something about it now, I probably wouldn't be around to meet my future grandchildren. And so A couple days later, I get out of the ICU. So those 2 days that I was in the ICU, remaining 2 days I was in the ICU, I just really concentrated on what can I do to try and take care of myself. And I realized, even though it was going to be a financial hit to leave, I had to. And I just concentrated on various stress relief tools and techniques. And what I noticed was that not only did my stress go down, my glucose numbers as a diabetic went down, my weight went down, and my
Mm.
energy level went way, way up. And it was as if, like, I discovered the fountain of youth. And here's the craziest thing, Denise. If you saw a picture of me 15 years ago when I was first diagnosed with stress-induced diabetes, and you see me now, with the exception of a little bit more gray hair, I actually look younger today than I looked 15 years ago. That is crazy. That's what stress does to us. It just eats us alive. And I'm so grateful that this happened to me, because if I wouldn't have ended up in the hospital, I honestly don't know. I mean, that was what, 5 years ago. I don't know if I would be alive today. I
Yeah.
really don't.
Yeah, exactly. You know, there's such an incredible story. It's blowing my mind. And I believe there's a reason why you
Mhm,
had to go to that extreme in order to do what you're doing now.
mhm.
Because the work you are doing, so important right now, in particular after the last 3 years we've gone through as a
Absolutely.
society. Oh my gosh. You know, you mentioned, yes, my family were telling me, but I had to hear it from somebody else out of a distance, that they have no reason to say this other than, do you realize what's going on? And I am so excited to have you here today, because I'm hoping that that will happen for somebody, one of our listeners.
Mhm,
Professor Pete has just walked through fire and back, and is telling you high stress is a killer,
mhm,
and you must change your ways.
mhm,
And you also mentioned that you have the power to be able to do it. You talked about how you employed some strategies, techniques, started learning some things, and you look younger now than you did. And you are feeling younger now than you
mhm.
did. I think that is so empowering. What types of things could our listeners who are listening saying, I think I'm in high stress, but I can manage it? Is there anything that you could say, well, I think I've lasted this long and I only have 10 more years to retirement?
Exactly. Well, the first thing I would say is, um, think about what is going on in terms of what your body or mind is telling you. So, we both we generate stress either mentally or physically. So, mentally, if you notice that you're having a trouble with a lack of concentration instead of being able to focus, that's a common sign. Or maybe you're having mood swings like you didn't have before. So you're going from happy to sad or angry at a moment's notice. That's a sign that you're mentally stressed. Um, Maybe you're having panic attacks about something, or anxiety about something in the future that may or may not happen. That's a clear sign. And another one from a mental standpoint, and you have to be honest with yourself, if you have a prescription drug or alcohol addiction, that's a clear sign that you're mentally stressed as well. So that's your body or your mind telling you that you're stressed. Physically, it might be, I know now that we're back to hopefully in person things, now that we're past COVID. Let's say that you typically would have maybe one cold a winter season, but you found this last winter that you were catching colds over and over again, like every month. That is a sign that your immune system's down and you're stressing yourself out physically. Probably the earliest sign of being physically stressed, for those of us who sit at a desk for most of the day, back and shoulder stiffness, because when we're stressed, we tend to hunch over. our desk, and that puts a lot of pressure on our back and shoulders. So that's a clear one. Um, having either sleeping too much or not enough sleep, that's a classic example of physical stress. uh, having digestive disorders where no amount of Pepto-Bismol is going to help you, that's a clear sign that you're stressed. Or reaching for the Excedrin bottle every day or every other day instead of occasionally because of these frequent headaches. That's a perfect example. And also, if you all of a sudden dramatically gain or lose weight quickly, that's a classic sign. In fact, uh, right before I was diagnosed with stress-induced diabetes, I lost 30 pounds in 30 days. Now, I was in my mid 40s, and at first I thought, wow, this is fantastic. I hadn't lost weight since my late teens, early 20s. And I was thinking, this is, I'm eating whatever I want. And I'm not doing any special diet. I wasn't doing any special exercise. I was just doing my normal stuff, and the pounds kept coming off. Then once the 30th pound came off, I thought, I better have this checked out. And, ding, 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 chicken, winner, chicken dinner, I got the diagnosis. And it was like, oh, okay. And now I have to deal with that for the rest of my life. So, the first thing that I would mention to the listeners is pay attention to your mind and body, because it's giving you these early warning signals. And the problem is, when we don't do something about it with these early signs, our body basically has no choice but to continue upping the ante. And once it has no choice, but if you think in your body, whatever that weakest link in the chain is, that's what's going to break. Mine was my pancreas. But the reality is, when we continuously stress ourselves out, where we're dumping that adrenaline and cortisol into our bodies basically unnecessarily, what happens over time is we create the cellular inflammation. And that cellular inflammation is what leads to chronic disease. Mine was diabetes. Others get heart disease, cancer, etc. And the problem is, once you've got it, it's with you. So, to pay attention to your bodies. And then the other thing that is so important, and you mentioned this, Denise, is it's up to us. It's up to us. We can only control ourselves. And so if we are mindful about this, and it doesn't require hours upon hours. It literally is just a mind shift. It's literally forming a positive habit of what to do when we find that we're stressed. What can we do? A particular technique that helps us to reduce that stress. That's really all we have to form that habit from. And if we can form that habit and we use it on a daily basis, what's amazing, it might only take 1 or 2 minutes a day, but if it's done regularly over time, the benefits will be enormous. We just got to use it regularly. It seems so simple, but you'd be surprised how many people I've talked to who say, well, I can't even find a minute or two. And I'm thinking to myself, you can't find a minute or two, but you have plenty of time to scroll your social media, or something like that. Come on. So
let's start there.
Exactly.
Finding the time, creating the time, because this is your life, right?
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. And the other thing too is, people have asked me, is all stress bad? And actually, no, not all stress is bad. Really, there's the terminology is eustress, EUSTRESS. That's positive stress, and then there's distress, DISTRESS, distress. So eustress is for, are the kind of things like if we're working on something that we're excited about or we're passionate about, we need eustress to meet our deadlines, whatever those
Yeah.
deadlines are. So that's not going to create negative stress in our bodies. What causes negative stress in our bodies or distress comes, in my experience and research, two flavors. So one flavor is rumination,
Hmm.
ruminating about something in the past. And this is classically something of regret or guilt.
Yeah.
So we sit there wallowing in our past, thinking, oh, I either should have or shouldn't have done this or that. Well, the reality is we cannot change our past, right? We know that, but we can learn from it. If we can take the positive from the past and say, you know what, I've learned this and I will try not to do this in the future.
Mhm.
Let it go. So if that's one. And the other one I mentioned a little earlier is anxiety about something that may or may not happen in the future. And the reality is, let's say we have to have we have to give a big presentation and we don't like giving presentations, or maybe we have to have a difficult conversation with someone and we sit there and we go, oh, this is going to go terribly, oh my gosh. Well, when we continue to think that way, we often manifest that outcome. And the reality is, if you think about it, why think that it's going to go bad? And I've always recommended to people who are thinking, like, let's say a presentation or a difficult conversation. Imagine, go, in your mind, just imagine right after that perceived challenging event. Imagine if you're giving a presentation, the audience giving you a standing ovation,
Right.
or the person that you have to have a difficult conversation with, imagine having them, give you a hug or shake your hand or just a positive acknowledgement. That makes a huge difference to reduce the stress. And the other thing that happens with when we either live in the past or we are stressed about something that may or may not happen in the future is we don't live in the present. And the thing is the only thing that we have guaranteed is our present. So, so it's really, really important to try and stay as present as possible and not worry about that in the future.
For sure. For sure. I love what you're saying because it tunes in exactly where I speak of all the
Hmm.
time is
Hmm.
how can we learn to be in the present?
Hmm.
And you talked as well about the consistency piece, which is exactly why I do this show for you, by you, because of you, taking time
Hmm.
out. And I talk about it being even less than a minute. If you have to do 30 seconds, go for it.
Yeah.
Go
Yeah.
for it. Like it doesn't matter. Do it every single day and watch what can happen. Right?
Absolutely. And so a lot of the entrepreneurs that I talk with, they say, well, I don't have a minute or two. Thinking, okay. So then I ask, do you use a calendar on your day? And they say yes. And are those appointments on the calendar important? Like, for example, we scheduled this talk. So that is something that I take seriously. I have
Mhm.
reminders for it. I'm going to be there on time.
Yeah.
Put a 1 minute calendar invite into your daily calendar and treat it like an appointment with yourself. And it's just as important as every other thing on your calendar that day. It's just what you have to do.
It's so true. And I would even push that envelope a little further. And I would say it's more important than all your
Hmm.
other work. Because if
Hmm.
you don't start giving back to yourself, your energy will not change. You will come at life from that, what you're talking about, that angst and that anxiety. When you start giving back to yourself, I've seen it happen with clients that I work with. When we
Hmm.
give back to ourselves in ways we've never done before, our energy changes. And when our energy changes, so do those around within our sphere of influence. It's so, so important and so undervalued, which is why we're doing our conversation today, right?
Absolutely. And I agree 100%. And, the other thing that is something to consider is, I ask people, they say, oh, health isn't as important as you think. And I say, okay, well, imagine the last time that you had the bad flu. And usually people have had some sort of either really bad cold or bad flu. And I ask, if you think back to that time, or times, did you feel like doing anything other than lying in bed? And they say no. And I said, okay, so let's imagine that you're just lying in bed with no energy. What good are you to your business, to the people that are important to you? Nothing. You're just not going to be any good. So to me, your health is paramount to everything else. And it's interesting because many years ago, back in the early 90s, I got trained in personal values work. And at the time, I identified my top 5 values, and health wasn't one of them.
Yeah.
And after this happened to me, guess what? Health is my number one value, no matter what. Exactly. No matter what aspect of my life is, that's number one now.
Yeah. Yeah. And because of that, you're here to be able to share today.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Exactly. Exactly. One thing I used to say in my former career before I started coaching was, there's only one person that cares about you the most, and that needs to be you, because nobody else will look after you. You have to look after yourself. And until you take that focus, and it's not egocentric, it is necessary. Just like you say, if you can't do for others when you're in bed, you can't help and do everything you want to do if you're in bed and you are incapacitated.
Right.
So yeah, it's not egocentric at all.
No, it's not. I mean, if you're feeling like, oh, it's egocentric, or you feel a little bit selfish because you're taking care of yourself, it's not about that you're being selfish. You're doing the right prioritization. That's what it really is. Because again, yeah, if you're in bed and you can't do anything, well, good luck. Guess what?
Yeah.
Now you have to rely potentially on somebody else to take care of you, and then you've put pressure on somebody else instead of taking care of yourself.
It's a great point. It's a really good point. Yeah. I know you've given so many golden nuggets, and I know people are going to stop and pause and write lots of notes if they're watching the replay. It's so full of great information. Is there one piece of advice you would love to give our audience today?
Yeah, we've mentioned it already. Whatever you do, don't trade your health for your career, because as much as you may be under financial pressure or stuff, the reality is the financial pressure will just become enormous if you lose your health. It really will. And and the last thing you want to do, you've been given this body and this mind, and hopefully by listening to this, you can start taking care of it better, because what I think is the two most important things that we have in life are our health and time. And once time is gone, we can't get it back, obviously. Health, we potentially can. Potentially can, if we've lost it. It's going to be difficult, but what if you haven't lost your health yet? How much more wonderful will it be if you can get yourself back on track before you have a debilitating health issue?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you are a living proof.
Yeah, I'm trying to be. It's interesting because I see some people and I think, wow, they look way older than their actual age, and I'm thinking, yikes, if you can take care of yourself better, it's amazing how our bodies can regenerate themselves. But you have to be able to take care of yourself.
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you so much for being here today and sharing your wealth and wisdom. Oh my goodness, it's such an honor to meet you. We are going to share in the show notes underneath, but we're going to tell you, people in the audience right now, that you can find Professor Pete and everything that he does and is available for in https://linktree /Professor Pete. We will put it in the show notes because it's hard to say it, and those who are visual are like, come on, Denise, put it in the show notes. We will put it in the show notes.
Perfect.
It has been an absolute honor to have you today and great to meet with you. I can't wait to see how many lives you continue to change. 100,000 is not enough. We've got to keep getting you out wide and far.
Thank you so much, Denise. And I really appreciate your time, and I really appreciate your listeners' time. And, I just they can reach out to me on the website, and I'm happy to provide support to them.
Thank you so much. And for those of you who are not in my private Facebook group, Mom Struggling Support Group, feel free to join that group where I go live once a week and give tips and tricks and strategies to help you with whatever your life struggles are. It could be with kids, it could be with yourself, it could be with others, relationships, communication. We will cover whatever we need to in order to support you to live a life that you want to live. Thank you once again for being here. Have a wonderful day, everyone.